Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bober. I work in marketing and communications here at Renew International, and we are really happy to have you here with us for what should be a wonderful conversation. We all learned in the past year how important our domestic church is, and so our topic is creating a Catholic household on a mission. And we have our own sister Terry Rickard doing an interview of the fabulous Dr. Greg Popcak. So take it away, Terry.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for joining us, and just really excited that my friend here, Dr. Popcak, we've done a number of things together over this past, well, the pandemic has brought us together, right, Greg? So, but this particular topic, households on mission, I think is so critical in our world today, in our church. Families are the core of our society, certainly the core of our church. And, you know, Renew is about helping parishes thrive. I don't think parishes can thrive unless families are thriving. So, Dr. Popcak, you want to say a little bit about yourself before I ask that first question?
Yeah, so I'm the founder and director of the Pastoral Solutions Institute at CatholicCounselors.com. It's a pastoral counseling practice. We've been doing telehealth and pastoral counseling with Catholic couples, individuals, and families since 1999. I have 18 therapists that work with me, all full-time therapists, all pastoral counselors that provide counseling with a Catholic integrated context with Catholics all around the world, really. In partnership, so our organization partnered with Holy Cross Family Ministries to form the Peyton Institute for Domestic Church Life, which is dedicated to continuing the legacy of Venerable, I should say, Father Patrick, the family that prays together, stays together, Peyton, who is a Holy Cross father, who of course is very famous for his family ministry work. And so our mission is to continue that legacy by promoting family spirituality and family well-being. And this project, the CatholicHŌM, Households on Mission, is part of that initiative.
Yeah, and we're at Renew going to be partnering with Dr. Popcak and Holy Cross Family Ministries to make this happen. So we'll talk to you a little bit more about that at the end. So let's get to the heart of it. So this topic of Catholic households on mission, everyone in the family being a disciple of Jesus Christ. So you mentioned, Greg, about Catholic households on mission is a new approach to both family ministry and family spirituality. So what's wrong with the old approach?
Right, no, that's a fair question. And so, you know, our tendency has been to see families as just one more group to minister to, right? So family ministry has largely been relegated to maybe marriage prep or supporting struggling couples. And that's a sort of a very functionalist approach to family ministry. Whereas, you know, the church really teaches that what we need to be doing is not just ministering to families, but training families to be the ministry that they're meant to be. That every family is meant to be a domestic church. And, you know, we use that phrase, but the church hasn't really defined it. So, but the idea of a domestic church, if you would think about it this way, it's like every family should be, for want of a better way to put it, a franchise of the parish, an outpost of the parish that brings the sacramental grace out to the world in the way that they live and love each other differently, and share that love with all the people that they interact with in their lives. So just as at Mass, the ordained priest consecrates the bread and wine to become the body and blood of Christ, it's the job of the domestic church to consecrate the world to Christ by bringing that sacramental grace out from the parish and into the world. We're not trained to do that as families. You know, in fact, what tends to happen is that the parish is really the center of Catholic life, when really what it's supposed to be, based on our own ecclesiology, is that the parish exists to form and commission domestic churches to go out to the world to do ministry. And so the approach to family ministry that we're advocating is one that gives the dignity that it's deserved to the domestic church and forms families to be real domestic churches from the ground up, so that we can carry that grace into the world and bring God's love to the world as well.
You know, we've talked about this whole sense that sometimes parents, mothers, fathers are so involved in the parish because they want to minister, right? That the ministry at home is sometimes neglected, so sometimes, and not really understanding that primarily as disciples, we are to disciple our children and our grandchildren, and that's where it happens. So,
well, yeah. And what I think, we have a tendency to think that ministry means doing churchy stuff at church, right? So if I do ministry, it's because I'm, a Eucharistic minister, or I'm a lector, or I do charitable work. And those are all good things. I'm not knocking any of that. Those are all ministries. But why are they ministries? Because they're activities that convey God's love to another person. Well, if you define ministry as an activity that conveys God's love to another person, there is no more powerful ministry than family life, because family is meant to be the place where we encounter God's love first and most intensely, because we can't give what we don't have. We can't give what hasn't been given to us. So family exists to be that school of love, that ministry where we convey God's love to each other through the activities of our everyday life and our relationships with each other, so that we can then carry that love out into the world. And currently, as a church, we're not doing that for families. We kind of support the idea that no, everything is supposed to happen at the parish. And so it's this weird sort of dynamic where even now parish life tears apart families because of all the activities that people are involved in there. And that's exactly the opposite of what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I think that's the switch. And I think that whole thing is that if parents and extended family, right, and there's all kind of mixed families, see themselves as ministering to each other. And I know I've heard you and Lisa, your wife, talking about the children who have your own children ministering to you.
Right.
And I think, right? I mean, that's.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the stories we tell, I mean, so this was a while ago, but it was a real, kind of life-changing lesson for us. I mean, we would always pray over our children every day and give them a blessing. And not just, once a day, but whenever they needed just extra special grace, or, hey, maybe they fell and kind of got a cut, or they had a test or something, we'd pray over them. And my wife was having a particularly bad day one day when our oldest now, who are adults and actually work in the counseling practice with us now. But when my son was 5 and my daughter was 3, my wife was having a terrible day, and she was kind of ready, to blow. And she just had this inspiration that she was praying, Blessed Mother, please help me here. And she just had this inspiration that she should have the kids pray over her. And so she said, okay, kids, come over here. And they thought they were going to get it, and she said, look, I'm really having a rough time. I'm having a hard day. I need you guys to pray over me. And because we've been doing it, we've been praying over them. They all of it, she didn't know what was going to happen, but they had a sense of it. So all of a sudden, she feels these little hands on her knee and one on her shoulder, and dear Jesus, please help mommy feel better. Please help us be good. Please help us all take care of each other. Those kinds of, and it just shifted up the whole dynamic, because you wanted to kill these kids, but all of a sudden they're praying over me, and they're asking for God's grace, and it was beautiful for them too, because they could see that they had spiritual power in this situation over these big scary people who were losing it, and it really brought us together and showed us that it's not, when they talk about spirituality in the home, it's not just what parents do for their kids or to their kids. It's the relationship that we're sharing with God with our kids that makes it really a domestic church.
And the witness of the parents is so huge, right? I mean, there's all sorts of studies that say that if the parents go to church, the percentage of children as they get older who would continue goes up significantly, right? So we got to kind of witness that, prayer in the home, all the kinds of things that make the home the domestic church. So
well,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to, we've mentioned that phrase domestic church several times, and I want to explain kind of what it means. So as I mentioned already, there's no official definition for the term. I mean, the church uses it a lot. It's used extensively in the catechism. The church documents refer to domestic church. But there isn't actually an official definition of it. So we've come up with a working definition. And this is rooted in, so in 2019, we hosted at the time it was just my organization, Pastoral Solutions, hosted a symposium at Notre Dame on renewing Catholic family life. And it was a group of 50 theologians, social scientists, pastoral counselors, pastoral ministry folks, to get together and really share research from their respective disciplines on what it would take to renew family life. And one of the questions that came up was, well, what is a domestic church anyway? Because I think that a lot of people have this sort of Ozzie and Harriet idea of the perfect, kind of Catholic family that glows in the dark and smells like roses wherever they go. And obviously that's not what a domestic church is. So the challenge, of course, is how do you define domestic church in a way that respects the dignity of marriage and the fact that marriage, has to be the foundation of this, and the sacraments have to be the foundation of it, but also respect the fact that there are a lot of people who are in irregular situations, whether they're single parents or they're grandparenting families or divorced families. They are domestic churches too. How do they fit into all of this? So our definition of a domestic church is it's a household of persons that are united to God and each other through the sacramental life of the church, and committed to living out the Christian Trinitarian view of love in their relationships with each other and the world. And the degree to which you can say that that definition describes your family is the degree to which you already are a domestic church, and the degree to which you could say that it doesn't describe your family is the degree to which you're called to be a domestic church. Right. And so that's sort of the already present but not yet fulfilled kingdom of God dimension to this whole thing, that everybody who is united through the sacraments, and lives in community with each other is to some degree a domestic church, but we're all working to live out that godly love in our homes and learn to overcome our tendency to just accept sinful, broken human love in lieu of the love that God wants us to share with each other and give to us.
I think about myself and learning about what forgiveness is, learning about what it means to be committed, in terms of my own parents. I went to Catholic school. I was involved in all sorts of things throughout my life, but I have to say that it was the faith of my parents. And, I remember my mom saying, that old saying about don't let, forgive before you go to bed at night, right? Don't let anger or, so that wasn't only between my parents, but that was something that they shared with us. So I think those kinds of things, people will say, well, when people went to Catholic school, they really had better foundation in the faith, or the religious ed program in my parish isn't so great, or whatever it might be. But the truth is, the parish supports the formation.
Yeah,
it's not the key. I don't care if it's the old days with all the sisters there and no, it's always been that way. It's the family.
What's funny is the research really supports that. So Christian Smith has been doing a lot of tremendous work at Notre Dame on this whole topic of faith transmission. And it's not an overstatement to say that if the family, certainly God works in lots of different ways, right? So, if this isn't true, he's identified other paths that people take to a faithful adulthood. But, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, what predicts a kid owning their faith as adults is the degree to which it was the source of the warmth in their home growing up. It wasn't not necessarily that their family, did religious things, but it had to be that the faith was the source of the warmth in the home. That there's a sense that we're closer and we love each other more and we try harder because of our faith, because we're trying to live out this love in our home. And that's why, as kids, I'm willing to go along with some of the rules or the inconveniences or these weird things that we have to do because we're Catholics, because I see that as all part of the warmth that we feel in our home. And so I want to carry that with me into adulthood, especially when I can see that my home has that warmth that my friends' homes who aren't faithful don't have. And it's not to say that, oh, we're so special. It's that God's doing something special in our home, and that he would do that same thing with anybody else who invited him in. But there's something about our faith that gives us a warmth that makes us want to try harder and show up for each other in ways that other families don't seem to. And that's really that dynamic that allows kids to carry their faith into adulthood, regardless of whether they went to Catholic school. I know I support Catholic school. I went
Of course,
Catholic
but that's, yeah.
but that's an extra, or
Exactly.
even regardless of whether they go to youth group, or regardless of whether they were catechized in this way or that way. All that stuff is supportive. If that warm family relationship isn't that tent post in the middle, everything else falls down.
Exactly. And we hear people share about that. And so I think what's important is it's not about, taking the catechism or the Bible and beating the kids over the head with it. It's about living that in a loving way, and so that the teachings of the church and the scriptures come to life in the family. So yeah, I love that thing about that they connect warmth with the faith. And I would say too, even the way I think about the neighborhood I grew up in, my parents and other Catholic families, they helped each other, they supported each other. So I think that's the other thing, that families can help other families, whether obviously not because they're Catholic, but because the families are Catholic, they help whoever is neighbor, right?
And I mean, honestly, that sense of community is really lacking. And that's one of the things we're hoping to address with this program, CatholicHŌM, Catholic Households on Mission, that by teaching families to live what we're calling this liturgy of domestic church life, which we'll get into explaining in a bit. But the more we're able to teach Catholic families to live this liturgy of domestic church life, we can create a community of families that can support both each other, but then support their neighborhood as well, their community, their parish, and bring God's love out from there, because there's a real missional dimension to Catholic Households on Mission.
Fabulous. So why don't you talk a little bit? So we talked about what domestic church is. Some of these are churchy words, and a lot of everyday Catholics don't even realize that term domestic church is in so many of the church documents. So I'm glad you shared on that. But also when we think of liturgy, we think of Mass on Sunday. So talk about liturgies as they are in the home.
I want to be clear to people that so when we talk about this program with the average person in the pew, we're not saying come learn about the liturgy of domestic church life. Literally no one's going to show up. I mean, it's like we're using this language with people who can kind of understand where we're coming from here. When we talk about it with Catholic families, it's all about really let's learn how to love and cherish each other the way God loves and cherishes us. Let's learn how to connect and be a stronger team. Let's learn how to care more deeply for each other and the people in our communities. And that, that's something that rings true for everybody. That said, just to kind of orient this or sort of locate it in our theology, liturgy, is a word that means worship. It's an act of worship, right? And in particular, in Catholic views, liturgy is a special act of worship that was not invented by us, but given to us by God, and is specifically intended by God to heal the damage that sin does to our relationships with Him and each other, right? So the liturgy of the Eucharist, Christ instituted the Eucharist. We didn't invent that, right? So He instituted the Eucharist, but He instituted it specifically to heal the damage that sin does to our relationship with Him, so that we can now have eternal life, and makes communion with others possible through the grace that's shared in that gift of self that Christ gives us through the Eucharist. So you have that example of a liturgy is an act of worship that was instituted by God and is intended to heal the damage that sin does to our relationships. Well, in a similar way, the Christian vision of family was not invented by people. If you look at prehistory or pre-Christian history, especially, say you look at pottery shards or the ancient records, in Babylonia or whatever, you'll see lots of different visions of family and lots of different understandings of what family was that are very similar to what we see now in our post-Christian world. The Christian vision of family was not invented. It's not just a social contract. It was revealed. In fact, Joe Atkinson is a biblical scholar at Catholic University. He has a book called The Biblical Foundations of the Family, Catholic Biblical Foundations of the Family. And he kind of traces salvation history. And he makes the point that as our understanding of God as Trinity evolves and who God is as a person, our understanding of family and what family looks like evolved as well, because we see the family as an icon of the Trinity. as Catholics, right? And so we can't understand what a family looks like, what the vision of family is in God's mind, unless we understand who God is, and that the family reveals something about that. So anyway, liturgy is instituted. So the liturgy of the family was instituted by God whenever he told Adam and Eve to go forth and multiply, right? There's that St. John Paul called marriage the primordial sacrament. So marriage, so the liturgy of domestic church life is the primordial liturgy that accompanies that liturgy of or that primordial sacrament. The idea that okay, so it's a liturgy of family life is that God wants to use our families to heal the damage that sin does at the root of civilization, at the root of society. He wants us to take that Eucharistic grace home and then live that out in our families by consecrating all the little stuff we do, from washing dishes to the way we discipline our kids, the way we, have game night, to all of it, to be able to bring a little bit of God's love into all of those things and consecrate those things to Christ, so that through that liturgy of family life, that liturgy of domestic church life, we can heal the damage that sin does to our relationships, or tries to do to our relationships on an ongoing basis, and learn how to love each other, not just with our broken human love, but with the love that comes from God's heart.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking a number of people that are listening, and just people I've talked to as I've gone to different places with my ministry with Renew, they're grandparents, and they want to bring the faith to their grandchildren, and they have adult children who may be not going to church, bringing the children there, or even somehow living that at home. So, what could you say to them in terms of creating domestic church?
Yeah, two things. First of all, the research supports you in that grandparents play a very underappreciated but deeply impactful role in passing on the faith to that next generation, to their grandchildren, and on from there. This liturgy of domestic church life that we're teaching to families, it works for grandparents as well. So there are three parts to this liturgy of domestic church life. One focuses on relationship, one focuses on ritual, and the other focuses on reaching out. And grandparents can do those things whenever they're watching their grandkids. There are four practices associated with each of these three rites in the liturgy of domestic church life. And when grandparents do these things with their grandkids, when the grandkids are over, it builds a strong bond between the grandparent and the grandchild, where the grandchild realizes there's something special going on here, and they experience that faith as a source of the warmth in that bond between the grandparent and the grandchild. So there again, they kind of catch those little hints, those glimpses of the importance that faith plays on a practical, relational level in their lives, which is really the key to evangelization.
Yeah. So wherever you are, so you have a family dinner, right? And so you with your grandparents, and your grandmother prays for not only the family, but also for neighbors and the world. And and even when the grandparents play with the children, right? Plays into.
Or even when you hug your kids, and you're holding them really close and really tight. I love you so much. You know what? There's only one person who loves you even more, and that's God. And I just love you so much, and He loves you too. And you just you bring God into those little moments, or even just some of the practices in the first. So we break the liturgy of domestic church life, like any liturgy, is broken up into three rites. There's the rite of Christian relationship, the rite of family rituals, and the rite of reaching out. And each of these, by the way, just to throw in a little more theology here, the rite of Christian relationship teaches families to live out their priestly mission of baptism by teaching them how to live out Christ's sacrificial love in the home. The rite of family rituals teaches families to live out their prophetic mission of baptism by teaching families to have Christian attitudes toward work and play and talk and prayer. And the rite of reaching out helps families live out their royal mission of baptism by teaching them to care more deeply for each other and their community and their parish. So the practices that are associated with each of these rites are very simple, practical things that anybody can do: grandparents, single parents, divorced parents, intact families, whatever, that really create that that warm dynamic in that first relationship that comes from the living out the sacrificial love of Christ, to create a sense of team by creating strong rituals for working, playing, talking, and praying together, and then create a sense of mission and the sense that God wants to use us to be a blessing to others through that rite of reaching out by looking for little ways that we can work together to be a gift to other people.
How about some things, I don't know, family rituals, simple things that people might be able to do in their home that might kind of help to create this sense of domestic church?
In the rite of family rituals, as I said, there are 4 categories: working, playing, talking, and praying together. Each one of those things is really important. So working together rituals include things like washing the dishes together, or picking up the family room before bedtime, or maybe even folding laundry together. And the thing about this is, we really try to emphasize for parents to do less for their kids and more with their kids, right? Because doing things for our kids burns us out. Doing things with our kids is kind of life-giving. And it's not about doing the chore and getting the thing done. It's about connecting while we do it. So you're washing the dishes, but you're kind of talking and sharing jokes, and maybe you have some fun music on in the background, and you're being a little silly with each other and splashing each other. Or you're folding socks, and you're asking the kindergartner to find all the blue socks and put them in a pile. And I have a friend who actually does it and has like a softball fight. These, but you wouldn't think that these are religious in any way, but they are, in the sense, because we're doing these things because God wants us to be a community in our home, to create that sense of communion in our home. And as kids grow up, they kind of learn, that's why we're doing this stuff. I just thought it was fun, but anyway, so, doing things like those little chores together throughout the day. That's working rituals. Play rituals, a game night, taking a walk around the neighborhood, having a laugh, something that's interactive, though, not just sitting there watching something, but doing something together. And that's a really important thing, because, I was working with a larger family that, as the kids were all great and really faithful, but as each kid hit about 15, 16 years old, they started getting into really big trouble, whether that was because of promiscuity or drinking or other problems. And the parents were like losing their kids one by one as they hit adolescence. And as I was talking with this family, they had a lot of work rituals because they actually had a family business and worked together. They had prayer rituals. They went to mass together. They did pray together every day. But they didn't have any play rituals. They never played with each other. And so what happened was, as those kids hit adolescence, they learned that mom and dad couldn't teach us anything about having fun and enjoying life, but our friends could.
Yeah.
So they learned all their lessons about enjoyment and pleasure and having a fun life from friends who wanted them to drink and sleep around and do all kind of destructive things. So, we as parents, when we have strong play rituals, we're teaching Christian attitudes toward leisure and fun and enjoyment, and it's possible to have a joyful and faithful life. And then, of course, those prayer rituals, which include everything from saying grace to a family rosary to blessing your kids and having them bless you, and just those little heartfelt prayers throughout the day that invite God into every moment. I would say, though, there are a lot of families that have rituals, but they don't work, because like what will happen is, we'll have family prayer, but then the kids are all squirmy and we fight with each other through the whole thing. Or we try to have game night and then all the kids they want to play different games and we can't get along with each other. That's usually a sign that there's not enough of the first rite, the rite of Christian relationship, because the relationship between these 3 rites is like building a fire. The rite of Christian relationship is the spark, the light of the match, okay, that gives that initial warmth. The rite of family rituals is the kindling that lets that spark grow into a real flame. And then the rite of reaching out is the blaze, the light and the heat that draws other people to the fire. And so when people have these family rituals, but they haven't invested in the relationship, they're basically stacking up a lot of dry wood and wondering why it's not catching. We have to invest first in those practices that facilitate warmth and attachment in the home to allow those rituals to really do what they're meant to do.
How about it? I'm just thinking, you do a lot of, obviously that's your life, counseling, and particularly family and marriage counseling. The whole thing with, electronics, our cell phones, can you give a little advice to families who are really frustrated the kids are doing this. I see it with my nieces and instead of talking. So can you talk a little bit about that?
A couple of thoughts on that. So when we get, and we do a radio program as well on Sirius XM, we get this call a lot. My kid's addicted to games, my kid's addicted to social media. What do I do? And the approach that most parents take is put that thing away, stop doing that, stop doing it. But the problem is we as parents, we're not telling our kids what to do instead. We're not giving them another option. So we think that if they just put away the phone, they're going to spontaneously come up with all these creative things, and it's suddenly going to be Little Women,
Yeah.
Green Gables, let's put on a cotillion, but the answer is really, if we create strong rituals for working and playing and talking and praying together, we're doing things as a family that are engaging the kids. They have less downtime to go and, waste on the phone for hours and hours and hours.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, of course, you can have reasonable expectations about, not having the phone at meals or not having the phone at family, game nights, whatever. But you create those rituals where, number one, that helps the kids feel more connected to you than they do to their peers. Number two, gives them something to do other than sit on their phones all day. And number three, it really helps build that balance into the kid's life without you having to constantly be on them, to put down the phone and go do something else. You're creating a structure that allows for that healthy balance to flourish. The only other thing I'll say about social media is that the research really does show that kids are craving connection, right? And if they can get that connection with mom and dad, they're willing to put down their phone. But if they don't have that strong connection within the family, then you telling them to put down their phone is threatening the only connection they've got. And that's why a lot of kids push back so hard, because our families are not as strong and as warm as they need to be. Our families we only get 15 minutes a day with our kids because we're too busy bussing them around to different activities instead of actually relating to each other. And then when we tell them to put down the phone, we're threatening the only connection they've got to other human beings because we're not connecting with them. So what are they supposed to do, right? So if we really want to come against, the pull and temptation of digital media, social media, the best way to do it is invest in this liturgy of domestic church life that fosters that kind of strong relationship that makes it easier for the kids to put it down.
Yeah, and the truth is, we as adults are doing the same thing, right? So how do you relate to them if you're, it's interesting.
The show once where she challenged kids and parents to not give up their phones for a week. And the parents had the harder time doing it.
Yeah, of course. We're right in there too, right? And I would say too, and I know that I've done this with especially my littler nieces and nephews, to play some games with them, I don't like to lose though. So they have a lot of practice that I don't have. So I got to think of one that I can actually win, So anything else you might want to tell us? We'll take some questions. So I hope people are thinking. You can just type them in. Jen will take them. But anything else that you might want to share that we might not have talked about?
Yeah, so most of what, I guess I'll leave it with this. Most of what we think of traditionally as Catholic spirituality is really drawn from the monastic or clerical traditions. And they don't tend to fit very neatly into family life, right? So we get a lot of calls from parents who'll say, I used to have this great prayer life before I got married and had kids, as if somehow marriage and family life is antithetical to living a holy life. So the whole CatholicHŌM project is really about fighting that idea. And by creating a family-based spirituality that's really, that allows families to do the stuff they already do, but do it a little bit more intentionally, and maybe a little more gracefully, to use a pun, to really experience Christ in those little moments of family life, so that they don't feel like they have to shoehorn spirituality into their everyday, but they can actually make Christ the most important member of their household, and experience Jesus walking with them throughout the whole day, playing games with them, having dinner with them, dealing with discipline issues and family conflict with them. Really, how does the family, bring Jesus home once they've experienced him in the sacraments, and then allow his presence to be the source of the warmth in the home that allows us to feel our faith in a tangible and practical relational way.
I think this is so important in terms of this call, the universal call to holiness. And we know this from the Vatican II documents that kind of said, so if you're really holy, you become a priest. Really, really holy, you become a sister or a brother or whatever. And the truth is, we all have this different path to holiness. And some of us do it as religious, as parents, as single people. So, in terms of Jesus' call to us, right? We all have, people say to me, well, Sister Terry, when did you hear the call? Well, everybody, we want to hear that call, right? I mean, it's not just.
Here's something else interesting too, that I'll just, so, you talk, we talk about the priesthood a lot, as, you mentioned that, as a path to kind of holiness. But there's no such thing as a priesthood without a liturgy, right? And that's why, so for example, we celebrate both the institution of holy orders and the Eucharist on Holy Thursday, because that's they can't tear them apart. But we regularly talk about the common priesthood of baptism without ever talking about what the liturgy is that goes with that common priesthood. Doesn't make sense, right? So our argument is that the liturgy that accompanies the common priesthood is this liturgy of domestic church life that allows us to consecrate the world to Christ, just as ministerial priesthood is ordered to the consecration of the Eucharist.
Yeah, it's living it every day. And even for priests, I mean, it's not just at Mass, right? It's the whole thing. It's your whole life. That's what authenticity is, right? That you bring what you become, what you receive. I love that from St. Augustine, right? So that we go to Eucharist, we receive Jesus in the Eucharist, and then we become Christ for the world. So, and here we have
home and share it with everybody. That's right.
Yeah, and share it. That's right. We're households on mission. We're people on a mission. And here's Jennifer with a mission. So Jennifer, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. And I just want to say for myself, thank you, Dr. Rickard, because I always love these conversations. I love doing these webinars because there's always going to be something that's going to make me think, that's going to make me smile. And I just so appreciate it. But we have a great question. This person said, know you've written several books. For someone who hasn't had much time to read, which one would you suggest is a good follow-up to this presentation that really kind of works with this topic?
Hang on, I use all my books to stack up my computer for these things. That's what the earthquake was about. Yeah, so we did 2 brand new editions of Parenting with Grace. It used to be one book. We split it up into 2, Birth to 11 and then 11 to 18. And so now we have Parenting Your Kids with Grace, and then Parenting Your Teens and Tweens with Grace. Both of these books are based on this liturgy of domestic church life model. So it's filled with sort of practical insights on discipline, family life and all of that, but it's built around this framework of this liturgy of domestic church life. So whether you're talking about younger kids or tweens and teens, either book covers all the material that we just discussed here, and it's really accessible to everyone.
It's great. It's great.
That's wonderful. That was the only question we have so far. So please, if you've got questions, there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Just type in, and I'll be happy to pass them along to Dr. Popcak and Sister Terry.
Well, the resources while we're waiting there too. If you are interested, so there will be a CatholicHŌM program. I want to be clear about this though. This idea of this liturgy of domestic church life, it's very important to us that it not be a program. That this is, we believe, a liturgy of the church, and that families should share it and learn it freely. We're developing a program to support teaching this liturgy of domestic church life. And so the website's under construction, CatholicHOM.com, but there is a place saver page right there that will redirect you to our Facebook group, which has about 3,000 families on it, talking every day about living out this liturgy of domestic church life and asking questions and sharing resources. So if you'd like to kind of follow up with that, you can go to Facebook and look up CatholicHŌM Family Discipleship, or just go to the website, CatholicHOM.com, and click on the link there. It'll take you to the Facebook page for now. We'll have a more extensive website later.
Great. And I think you have the Peyton Institute, you have a workshop coming up. You want to say a webinar coming up? You want to say a word about that and where they can?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so we've been doing a series of trainings, mostly with members of the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers and other folks who are in different dimensions of ministry that touch on family life. We have our next training on this Liturgy of Domestic Church Life coming up starting October 22nd, Friday, October 22nd from 11:30 to 1. And it goes for 5 Fridays from the 22nd to whatever that ends up, the 19th, I think it is in November. And each session looks at a different, looks at, first of all, the overall Liturgy of Domestic Church Life. Then we go into each of the 3 rites. And then we talk about how this model really kind of changes the way we think about family ministry and even the way we do church in a lot of ways in the last session. But it is very practical. It is more geared to family ministry people or people who are in ministry of some sort. But it focuses on teaching these practical concepts to families so that you in your ministry can help families live this out. It's also, you'll also get a lot of tips on how you can do it in your own homes as well. I just say it that way because it's not specifically for the general public and parents who might feel a little lost because of the theology that we'll be presenting. But if anybody has any kind of a ministry or theology background, it'll be more than accessible for you.
So, and that information, Dr. Popcak has given me a link. So there is going to be a follow-up email with the recording of this webinar, and I will include that link for you. So a couple more questions have come in. So Dr. Popcak, would you be able to repeat the definition of the domestic church?
Yeah. So we would say that a domestic church is a household of persons connected to God and each other through the sacramental life of the church. That's really important because it's the sacramental grace that makes it a church, right? And though committed to living out the Christian Trinitarian vision of love and their relationships with each other and the world. So that's the missional dimension of it. One more time. It's a household of persons committed to God and each other through the sacramental life of the church and committed to living out the Christian Trinitarian view of love in their relationships with each other and the world. That it respects the dignity of marriage in that because, of course, there's the additional sacramental grace that's given through marriage, and also the fact that marriage serves as an icon of the bride and the bridegroom. But it doesn't exclude other families because it recognizes that any family that is, any household that's united through the sacramental life of the church and doing what they can to live out that Christian Trinitarian view of love in their life with each other and the world is on the road to being that domestic church. I would also say, that definition fits religious communities, because religious communities aren't part of clergy, strictly speaking. They're actually types of domestic churches. And so this definition fits the religious communities as well. So it's very broad, even while it's respecting, the primacy of that marriage vision.
Great.
Wonderful. And the other question, someone's asking if you please say again the 3 rites, the relationships, family rituals, Christian faith.
It's the rite of Christian relationships, the rite of family rituals, and then the rite of reaching out. And the rite of Christian relationships is about living out the priestly mission of baptism by helping families live out that sacrificial love of Christ in their homes. Should I mention the practices or just kind of give the overview here?
I think the overview is good because, that's fine.
The rite of family rituals helps families live out the prophetic mission by encouraging them to have strong rituals for working, playing, talking, and praying together. And that way families learn to be a strong team, but also to convey Christian attitudes toward work and leisure and relationship and faith. And then the last rite, the rite of reaching out, is all about teaching families how God wants to use them to be a blessing to each other and the world. So part of that is like developing how to develop family charism, or even just little things like the ministry of kindness, saying please and thank you and you're welcome, or smiling at people, or not running them over when you're running into the store. Being that family that's kind of known for the family that actually is kind to the server at your local restaurant. Those are all ministries, because when we do them intentionally to share God's love with other people, that's what a ministry is. So those 3 rites, the rite of Christian relationship, the rite of family rituals, and the rite of reaching out, combine to make the liturgy of domestic church life. And they go together, like I said, like spark, kindle, blaze, right? So the rite of Christian relationship is the spark of love of the Holy Spirit that allows us to love differently, that lets the kindling of family rituals catch fire so that it can become a blaze that draws others through the light and the heat that we throw to Christ.
When we talk about evangelization and, this vision of a parish as a community of small communities, it's so in line with this Households on Mission, the sense that you're really about making, making disciples, and those disciples are your family, and, creating this sense of community, and always about mission. I mean, at Renew, from our founding, this thing about creating small Christian communities that are not just support groups, but also on a mission, just like when we bring that into our home. I love that title, Households on Mission, because it's so about what it means to be disciples in the world.
And I know, Renew, you're the small group people, right? But families are really God's first small faith
Group.
and,
Exactly.
and that's what this program is
Absolutely.
really empowering families to really be what they're meant to be, those small faith groups that support and encourage each other in Christian discipleship, intentional discipleship at home.
Absolutely. Jen, you want to go just to the next, we'll talk a little bit?
Yes, and I just do want to say that the only additional thing that I've gotten is thank you from everyone, Dr. Popcak, for your answers and for responding to everybody. So
just say a little bit
wonderful
of
wisdom, I was going to say, is part of something that's going to be coming soon from Renew International, Eucharist Matters. Terry, you want to talk a little bit?
Yes. So, Renew is partnering with Dr. Popcak and his wonderful wife, Lisa, and Holy Cross Family Ministries to really bring this, just this whole sense of Households on Mission to a new process that we'll be working on called Eucharist Matters. And it will be for young families as their children prepare for First Eucharist. So we'll be offering this to parishes. And so the first part of it will be focused on what the Eucharist is, the real presence. It's going to be a fully online program. And then we'll have both Greg and Lisa then kind of bridge it to what it means to be households on mission, really living out that Eucharistic life as a family. So you'll be hearing more about that. Will be coming up. I think both Households on Mission and Eucharist Matters, which will be integrate with Households on Mission, right? I think, Dr. Popcak, we're hoping for the World Family have it ready by then.
22, yeah, is the so, and that program will have we'll have 6 video sessions that are all being professionally shot. Actually, we Lisa and I on those videos will be interacting with an animated family, the HOM family, so it's really nice kind of back and forth with animations and very great production values on that. There will also going to have a series of activity kits that families can get as a subscription, basically, that once a month, that allow them to just open up the box and do the games and activities and learn these different rites, but just by doing stuff. They don't have to, get the theological concepts. They just do the fun things and get the ideas by doing that. So it'll be the online program, it'll be the videos, it'll be the activity kit, and it'll all tie into the idea that when we encounter Christ, the Eucharist, it should change everything, starting with the way we live as families.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of parishes are moving towards a family-based ministry. So both Baptism Matters, Eucharist Matters, and the Households on Mission, all the activities, we're hoping to bring that so that those of you who are catechists, directors of religious ed, that you can integrate this into your family ministry and really share this great opportunity to transform families to the domestic church, Households on Mission. So I think that's about it, Jennifer.
The one other thing that we wanted to share about is that we actually have things for family faith sharing. So if you go to store.renewintl.org, there is a youth and young adult section of the store. And if you go there, you will find all of our things that they're actually designed so they can be used with our process Arise, but they actually work perfectly well on their own. And they're just a great way for the family to come together and to talk about their faith.
Great.
Which is what we're all about.
So thank you all for joining us. And please, if you have anything that you would like to share with us, please, Jennifer will give you the Renew email. We'll also give you all when she sends the recording to you in a couple of days, You'll also have Dr. Popcak's information, maybe the book we could put up there too, Jennifer, and some other resources that Dr. Popcak has and his wife, Lisa, and some other things we have from Renew. So, and please share this video with, people who are in family ministry, with your children. And
if you didn't like it, tell your enemies.
that's right. Exactly. So please share it out there so people start to talk about this and that concept of being households on mission. So God bless you and your families, and hopefully we'll see you for the next webinar.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Dr. Popcak, and have a wonderful day, everyone.
Great.